That's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Plus he's represented by council.
That's true.
So it's a double.
That's true.
You might tell everybody that there's no collection taken on the front row.
They were calling them first?
Meesy's the only one that ever sits on the front row. He knows that we don't collect no collection plate.
He knows, and he wants to be able to jump up.
We'll start the collection plate on the back row.
The obsession is with city.
You'll put a sign
I
up.
got 3 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you'd just rise and join us for the Pledge of the Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If you wish to address the board, there's sheets in the back that you need to fill out and give them to this gentleman here, Mr. Shoemaker. And if you have a phone with you, please turn it to silent so we don't have phones ringing during the meeting. I'll call the roll. Our district attorney, Tony Pierce, is here. Supervisor Tinkle, Supervisor Banks, Supervisor Feinberg, Supervisor Guy, and Supervisor Flaherty are all present. And our district manager, Chris Shoemaker, is here. So, with that, do we have people signed up to speak?
We have no one to speak to agenda items. We do have 2 speakers for non-agenda items.
Okay.
And the first one would be Amy Thiebaud, Magnolia Lakes.
Good afternoon. Amy Sarazin-Thibault with Pavese Law Firm on behalf of Magnolia Lakes. First and foremost, thank you for your time and consideration today. Really appreciate it. We're here today to request assistance from the GSCDD in obtaining a buffer along the chain link fence that will run along the southern boundary line of the MMM East Lee County High School. The association has already requested to the school district directly that they install this buffer hedge to separate the impacts from the new school, this high-intensity use, from the existing lower-intensity residential uses that are adjacent to the south of the high school parcel. The school district thus far has denied this request because a buffer wall or a buffer hedge in this instance would not be required under the Lee County Land Development Code. However, it's not unusual for developers to install a buffer even where it's not required to separate the impacts from uses. As you are acutely aware, the school district's contractors undertook some devegetation activities on their parcel, and in the process encroached onto GSCDD property, namely the conservation easement within the Magnolia Lakes subdivision. They also encroached onto private residential property as well. They encroached onto some individual lots, and they've cleared those lands and destroyed what was once a viable wetland in the process. As a result, what the school district did was not only a violation of local and state natural resources, regulations, and laws, it was also a trespass, among other legal violations. So we are aware that the South Florida Water Management District is now requiring the CDD to amend and modify its ERP and to release that conservation easement over that parcel. Given that the CDD has some leverage here with the school district, being that y'all could feasibly and probably successfully bring some claims against the school district, we are simply requesting consideration that you will work with the association and potentially on behalf of the association to negotiate with the school district a landscape buffer hedge. Please let me know if you have any additional questions. We're just looking to have the board consider this formally on its next agenda at its next meeting.
Madam Chairman, and if I may, just briefly, I can pass around to, this is a graphic, so the area in yellow is the area where the conservation easement is, the CDD owns and fees. The school board property to the north with the construction plans and the houses, just so you can understand the area.
And I have some visual aids as well. Feel free to take one and pass them.
Could I get your name again?
Yeah, it's Amy,
Amy?
A-M-Y.
Questions?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Amy, I think the issues you have are there are multiple issues. Issue one is during the planning and permitting process of the school, we worked with the school's engineer with the understanding that that wetland, which is about a half acre on our side, was going to be taken out. And that was a part of the deal. They were going to take that out and in fact, include that in their mediation off-site because they're taking out 10, 15 acres of it on the other side of the line. That was part of our understanding. So them coming in and doing any work to eliminate that, to me, I don't have a problem because we didn't want the daggone thing to begin with. We don't want that wetland for one reason. It's causing damages to the pond in that the water level has to be artificially a foot higher than it needs to be, and it's got other hydraulic and aquatic issues. So I don't really have a problem with that unless you're saying they didn't include our half acre in their agreement that they told us they were going to do. That's a whole different ballgame because now they've reneged.
It's my understanding that y'all's conservation easement and the destruction of that wetland therein was not part of any agreement. It's my understanding that those devegetation activities that were undertaken on that conservation easement area were undertaken wrongfully because the school district had not properly staked their parcel lines. So because, and you know, please, by all means, I'm open to any additional information that maybe I have not reviewed, but it's my understanding that that was not part of the agreement and then that those activities did amount to a trespass.
We had an agreement with the engineer that half acre was going to be eliminated because our argument is you take that wetland out on your side and we're stuck here with that half acre on our side that's still necessitating having that pond level. That's not good for us. They said they were going to put that in with the request.
My understanding, I guess Chris may better address it, because my understanding is there a conversation Chris had with the project manager or the engineers in South Florida where South Florida said, yes, you can go ahead and modify your permit to take that out and remove the conservation easement. And that's what, $6,000 to $10,000 number to the district to do that. And then the school district said, the engineer indicated, or project manager, that they would help pay for it, but we've not yet asked them to do that. And I think we need to do that. Is that correct, Chris?
That's correct. They've said that they would, absorb that cost. And we had conversations several months ago with the Water Management District that wetland was going to go away, and they said, fine, go modify the permit.
So the issue of them assuming that they've dotted the i's and crossed the t's and did the necessary permitting to remove it.
They did not.
If they did not, then we got a problem to get in. But they've even got a bigger problem because the minute that they didn't do it, then they had no grounds to cross that magical line and go in there. We were of the opinion they were doing it. Now, the issue of the barrier and the buffer, and that fly is a pain, that barrier and the buffer along the full length of Magnolia Lakes on their south side, I thought they addressed that at the last meeting. Somebody asked that question, and one of them indicated that they were not going to do that. I find it that the only way that we could get them to do that would be if we developed some form of leverage over something that they didn't do to try to get them to install it.
And that's why we're here requesting as a courtesy that you consider including this buffer hedge as a condition in your negotiations with the school district. Clearly, it's not the CDD's responsibility to undertake the financial, legal, and administrative costs and obligations required to modify the permit because of the school district's wrongdoing here. So as you do negotiate and you do have leverage, we simply request consideration of adding that buffer hedge as a condition.
Now, this creates some problems. They're putting in, as I recall, they said they're going to put in a fence.
3-foot berm.
Yeah, it's a berm with a fence on the top, yeah. I'm assuming that their berm, the toe of the slope of the berm on the south is going to be at their property line, which would then necessitate the fence being 6, 7, 8 feet onto their property.
Right.
Where's the hedge going to go? On our side or their side?
It should go on, in my opinion, clearly, in a perfect world, it would go on their side.
Okay, because if
so
it
that they
goes on their
maintain it.
side and you've got a slope, and let's say a 3-to-1 or a 4-to-1 embankment, that only thing the people are going to see, working myself into a corner that I don't like, but keep talking, is you're not going to see that hedge if it's on the downside of their side. theoretically, the best place to have the hedge would be to hide the fence and the school and put it on the slope on the Magnolia Lake side to where then you don't see anything.
But don't you normally, in some cases, have, one of those berms with your vegetation incorporated into the berm, so you've got a 3-foot elevation, then you've got vegetation on top, which will raise, let's say, depending on what you use.
Well, it depends upon the maintenance costs that they want to project, because when you start putting hedges, I'm familiar with this over on one of the associations. It's a nightmare and expense because you can't get in and mow it with any type of a gang mower. So you have to go in there by hand and use either weed eaters or use like a lawnmower type mower, and the price goes through the roof. But either way it goes, that would be my recommendation, that if we argued for a hedge, we'd put it on the downslope on our side, and they still have to maintain it because it's on their property. But I'm looking for what the leverage is that we're going to get to do it, because they were pretty emphatic at the last meeting. Berm, fence, it.
And it's my understanding that they were so emphatic because they have no reason to accept that request absent some kind of leverage.
Typically, they want to be good neighbors, but that's not very neighborly.
I don't mean to sound cynical, but as a land use and environmental attorney, I often find that people who are developing properties tend to want to do the very minimum to make the neighbors happy. They don't necessarily want to undertake more than they're required to, and they often only do so if they get something in return. In this instance, it might be that the residents and or the CDD don't sue them for trespass and hold them up in litigation for years.
20
Yeah, just, so when I look at this and when I ride past, I can see the gap, and it's specifically in alignment with the area, that's what I'm looking for,
The berm?
Buffer
The
easement.
berm?
not the berm, but the wetlands. So,
The former wetlands, I guess.
the former, right. So when you look at it, and even I've got some pictures, because it comes in like this, which there was no vegetation because it's a wetland. So once you start to clear out, there's nothing. Whereas if you go to the left or right, you do have some existing vegetation there. I just want to make clear, or want to be clear on what the ask is from Hampton Park. If you're looking.
Magnolia
Magnolia
Lake.
I'm sorry, Magnolia Lakes. I'm just so used to saying Hampton Park, I think. That what you're looking for is a vegetation buffer. I don't think that we'd have to be as specific as saying that it's a manicured, type environment where you have to have a specified hedge that has to be trimmed. I think what you're looking for is just a barrier, right? You're looking for a true natural buffer. So the type of what we would probably do if we were to go down this path is to go into some type of negotiation where what is cost effective, that will provide coverage, minimal maintenance, so that both parties, because I'm sure that the school would want some separation from houses and the same thing. And my point is, I'd love to go into this because I do think, with this area, it would be better served if it was not within our jurisdiction, because it's just more maintenance and it has no purpose for us anymore. The release of that, I think, would be fine. But at the same time, I think we do want to operate in good faith, I think, because again, I've got 4 kids, and 3 of them could potentially, leverage that high school. So I'd love for us to start up on a good foot, and I think we have in the very beginning. We've been engaged and had some really good dialogue, but now is construction. This is where rubber meets the road, right? And this is where preliminary discussions meets actual plans. So I don't have any problem with having some open discussions. I just want to be very clear on what the ask is, that we've got some flexibility here, that we're not so stringent to say we need to manicure this. And
What's the length of the buffer? 2,100
I have
feet?
the,
That's another thing that has changed.
from end to end, right?
India, what's the length end to end?
Between the properties, it was 100 and now changed to 83, and then at the back, 50.
No, from the east to the west, the full length across back of all the lots.
Plot.
it
About
is,
28?
1,128 feet, 1,200 feet. So divide that, if you put in plants, Typically, they plant those, if they're putting in a 15-gallon bucket, they're planting those at 3-foot spacing. So you need 400 plants, 15, 18,
Well, but you can't do that
$20.
because
You're looking at $10,000
you
bucks.
would, I mean, where's Al's not
It's
here,
a straight
but
shot.
you would layer them too, right? So you would,
Well, if you use what we've been doing over in Gateway Greens, you put in one row of those signature plants, and in 3 years, everything's gone. You can't see nothing. And they're very easy to maintain, and they're pleasant to look at. But you're looking at probably between $5,000 and $10,000 to do this, so that's kind of what we're talking to them to do.
we should probably see if maybe even L can even come up with potential, I mean,
So
the
you're
school board
asking,
knows what it's.
you're asking for plants to, in more than just the buffered area, you're asking it on the whole fence line?
Yeah, the whole
The entire
1,200
fence
feet.
To
line.
ensure a buffer consistent.
Right.
You know, there are some areas that are gonna require more vegetation because like the wetlands had none, so.
And even if, just to start out, I mean, assuming that this conservation easement is released, this easement area is dedicated back to the association, or if the CDD retains management responsibilities over it, whatever that responsibility looks like, ultimately, that won't be the school district's responsibility. We're just requesting that they do install some sort of buffer that blocks the impacts from what is a relatively intense use. It's a high school. It's anticipated to have quite a large capacity. I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that some sort of landscaping buffer goes up. I mean, we're not requesting a project wall here. We're not requesting an 8-foot, beautiful monument wall. We're asking for some sort of native vegetation. It can be low maintenance.
So I take it somebody from Magnolia has contacted the school, and the answer was no.
Yes, sir.
Wasn't hell no, but just no. Well, I think we got to get the answer on the wetland, because the other one is, and I disagree a little bit with you on the wetland, because if that wetland is gone, I would assume that as a part of the work they're doing in the area where they did the wetland, they're going to bring in fill dirt, and we'll make that wetland somebody's backyard, and it'll all be sod now. No need to do anything else. If it was my yard, I'd want to sod it in.
And I think part of the stipulation too is where that area is that was wetland, that be brought to the same level that, the other property.
That's why I say bring in fill dirt.
And that the line still, the snap line still stays intact. You're not gonna encroach on that wetland.
Yeah.
And clearly, that's something that we would have to address with the Water Management District. Ultimately, they're the approving body for modifying the RP, but
Would be crazy to eliminate the wetland and then leave a depression in the backyard of what, 8, 9, 10 houses. I mean,
Right.
that's
I don't
ridiculous.
think that
And I
they
think
would
that part
require.
of depending, and I think that's why I can come back next week with more detail for the board to act, would be an outline from the standpoint of, number one, from the standpoint of what we would ask the school district for. Number two, which would include paying for the cost of the ERP modification, and part of that modification would include eliminating the conservation easement and the ability to fill. So that would be part and parcel. And the board may even want to consider a package where, in addition to asking the school board for landscaping, at least the district portion of it, to the entire length, but that property, if it's no longer needed for its originally intended purposes, if it's not needed for drainage, if it's not needed for any other buffer from the district's perspective, arguably the district can determine that to be surplus, and then have a determination as to whether or not it's in the best interest of the district to convey it to the Magnolia Lakes Association because it's just this isolated
right,
piece
yeah.
that's not serving any other function. Its function as a wetland as long as it's gone.
And once they put up what's on that side, I mean, the school district's not gonna really care.
No.
There's no intent of use.
We got to find out what happened in the communication that they said they were going to do, what they didn't do. That's the first thing, and maybe Chris makes a phone call, but that would be then prepared for the next
And
agenda.
Chris, do you know whether this was included in any mitigation with South Florida?
No, on that side, but we did have those discussions with the district that it would go away. The ERP was issued, and the only thing we were going to do next would be to modify the permit because it was our wetland. And our discussions with the school board was that they would take care of that permitting cost and do that process for us. But it wasn't intended to happen right now. They were going to start moving forward with it, but this issue came up where they actually went through and clear cut it.
And then the third issue was if they were anywhere outside this line, and south of the fence line or the property line, then they are trespassing.
It's trespass.
And I had a conversation with Chris just to make sure that since South Florida recognizes it's no longer functional, that the fact that another party went in and engaged in unpermitted activities in the wetland, that South Florida wasn't going to come after us. We've had that issue in the past. And so it sounds like South Florida recognizes, the reality of the situation, so then I doubt anything like that will
Sounds
happen.
like we have a little leverage.
And I have additional photos
It would
from,
be nice to clean it up, but you're right, they were kind of premature on their, it's called jump the gun.
at the end of the day, the school district has brought some liability upon itself, and it would be far less expensive for them to both financially cover the cost to modify the ERP permit and also to put in that native vegetation, especially, I mean, when we're talking about modifying the ERP permit, we probably would have to discuss what kind of vegetation goes in there. There's a lot of native vegetation that's very low maintenance, that is used regularly and permitted in ERPs. I don't have to tell you all this. You deal with this all the time.
Did the fire go into the wetland?
No.
Didn't get that far over? Okay.
Although, I mean, I do just tend to disagree with you. If the permit is modified so that it's no longer a wetland, so the conservation easement is replaced, I don't think South Florida will care what vegetation is going there, because actually you probably take it out of the permit. I mean,
It's going to be grass, that's what
yeah,
it's going
that's
to
what I
be.
mean, so I think South Florida is not, once we modify the permit, the idea, I think, is to take it completely out of the permit.
So we'll put this on the next meeting's agenda.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And please let me know, both Chris and Tony have my contact information, so I'm happy to provide any and all information and detail necessary. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next and
This
last
is the
speaker,
last issue with the school.
Lafredo,
The name is-
Bluestone Circle. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And
NMM.
he wanted to talk about parking in Stony Brook.
I didn't know what it
My name is Vince Lafredo. I live on Bluestone Circle in Stony Brook. Last night, I took the liberty of sending a late email to each member of the board outlining some of the issue that's recently cropped up on parking. I attend quite a few board meetings in Stony Brook over the last 5-6 years, and I've lived there a little over 6 years. And my issue with this parking issue is the fact that it's an issue. We discussed this. I addressed this board 2-3 years ago about the very thing on no parking on the streets. And I told you, they were there. We all signed our agreements with Stony Brook to live there. And we agreed to the covenants that were set. And everything I read said there were no parking in the streets. And as you live there, as you live in a community, you get to know your neighbors, you become friends, you live with circumstances. You know there's going to be parking in the streets, but you contain it. You don't make it a big issue. I grew up in the what you call the inner city today. I grew up there. So I know what it's like. I know what the parking situation is, and I know what it leads to as far as the residents that live there. It can be abused, and it is getting abused. And I guess this whole thing came up because of towing. And then I went online, and I read this Gateway Sun here. And I saw that Mr. Tinkle was quoted in it, and Mr. Banks, and Margaret's name was brought up. And I get to the point where it's, where did this come from? And I know we were talking at the board meeting here in July and August, towing became an issue. And one of the board members in Stony Brook got a little bit contentious about it, saying that it was going to be selective enforcement. And I knew when that was brought up, the parking issue was going to come back. Because you find out when these things happen that it ends up getting abused. And it's the same people. We've got one right in our street. Guy runs a business. He abuses it. We live with it as neighbors. And he does clear it up. When you say something, he takes 3 or 4 cars off the street. My point is, when the Gateway Sun, I don't know what their issue is with Stony Brook. And every time they bring it up, it becomes an issue. And this gentleman, I was there on a Sunday morning about 2-3 years ago when they're handing out pamphlets that you can park on the streets. All I'm telling you as a resident, I live there. I want to enjoy life. I think 778 homes want to live their life. You go in the gates, they come down, you just want to live your life. You socialize, you talk to neighbors. Why every day do we have to have a controversy on parking and signs? And I mentioned to the board 3 years ago that the signs were up when we got there. Why not just grandfather them in? Now, I'm not a lawyer, but if they were acceptable, and I've got documents, I went to Stony Brook's website, and I quoted several to you in the email. I think section 2.1, the responsibility for the roads, and that goes back to 2002, the document. Then I saw there was one from an amended CCRs in 2015, and then in June of this year, specifically, it was outlined in simple form for all residents, new residents and old, that no parking was on the streets. And then the enforcement is up to the community to enforce. And I'd like to be transparent, and I'd like to go and see that this issue either goes away or make an adjustment on this. And based on the article, it said that a motion was going to be brought up about this, and it quoted you, Mr. Tinkle. It's not to, I'm not disrespecting you. It's just what I'm reading. And it's gone public. And I'd like to see Stony Brook just live as a community as opposed to becoming an issue constantly. I think we in the community can contain our issues. I think we can live with it. They've done a great job on the board. And when something comes up, it's addressed and corrected. And I'd like to see this one go away. And again, I'm talking for 4 of my neighbors because they're up in arms of me, and I can't make it to the meeting, so I said I'll go and address the committee. I've talked to Joe McCulca in the past on a street sign, a stop sign, and a crosswalk, and I get pushback on it for almost 4 years. My one neighbor, he couldn't make it, but he's really getting upset about it because it's right near his house. And I'm saying, we're worried about no parking signs, and yet I'm talking about one stop sign that we could replace. And I didn't want to confuse the issue today, but this is what happens. So, and anyway, that's pretty much it. So if you get my email and you read it, that pretty much outlines what I sent to you. The documents that are on the Stony Brook page, there are probably more. I just pulled the ones that I could address quickly and outline. And again, that's what I go by. That's the agreement I have with Stony Brook to live there. And I live by those rules. So that's my point right here.
Question? Yeah, I was going to bring it up, but are you going to be here the whole meeting?
Yes.
Okay, because it's not on the agenda, but I'm going to bring it up in supervisor comments. And I do have plans to introduce a couple of motions. But you said one thing that, and we can get into it in more detail later, but you said one thing that I didn't understand, that the association can handle it. The association has no authority to handle it. That's the problem.
Handle what?
Anything that has to do with the streets and the roads, they don't belong to the association.
I understand that.
That's our problem. That in a nutshell is the problem. If we could get those roads back over to Stony Brook and the HOA, all of this goes away. All of it goes away.
Well, the question, and I guess what you need to do, it needs to be brought up to the people what this encompasses. A one-day sale back to Stony Brook, what does that encompass? I have brought it up previously about infrastructure within Stony Brook. Yeah, I don't believe it's been attended to, especially since we had the floods 2 years ago. And that's the roads. Yeah. So if you're saying you sell the roads back to us, is it the top level or the bottom level? Is it the drainage? I mean, there are a lot of things encompassed there.
Every other community in Gateway, the roads are owned, with the exception of Pelican Preserve. And those are public roads still under a bond, so they're a little bit different. But every other community in Gateway, the roads, the road rights of way, and the landscaping of those, plus the street lighting, belongs to the HOA. The CDD has easements that are granted via the plats that allows the CDD to maintain the drainage, the water, the sewer, the irrigation, all the other stuff. So if there was a transfer, it would only be for those assets that would have to do with the road itself. The road right away, the road, the sidewalks, the street signs, and the lighting. That would go to you just like it goes to every other community in Gateway. We would still maintain via an easement all the other documents. The issue is, how do you do it? My thought is you just simply go out and for $1, you have a sale, the only one's going to buy it's the HOA, and you transfer it over. There are some legal issues, and we're going to talk about that later.
That's where I wanted to hear. Okay.
So
Very good.
I
Thank
wanted
you.
to see if you're going to stick around to hear that part.
Yeah,
but
definitely. Thank
that's-
you.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
That's all the comments we have today.
That fly is a pain.
He's not bothering me.
UPS.
Chris, we got the status report on the stormwater management monitoring
Sure.
equipment.
John Richmond with High Sites is here today. And his company is responsible for installation of the water level monitoring equipment in the flowway. And he was out today working on upgrades to that system that the board approved in July. And we asked him to stop in and make a brief presentation. And
Yes, good afternoon. Is this displaying to
no, it should.
to
And
you guys? I got it plugged in here. Or have it on a zip drive also. If you're ready to use that. Yes, good afternoon. John Richmond of High Sites, and thank you for your previous business and current business. About a year ago, we've installed 13 water level sites for you across across your district. Yeah, just the presentation part there, Chris, please. And I just got a dozen slides here or so to show you the status of that, the work that we'd gotten done, and the new work you've just approved. As soon as we get everything going here.
We only had a technology guy somewhere in the room.
I'm pitching, get ready to run.
Is it on?
Over there, or over here. There you go. Now F5. Hit F5. There you go. Yeah, we're engineering and SCADA instrumentation firm, so just, I guess just hit the next slide or right arrow or anything like that. So, yeah, second one, next one. So, I'm going to show you really briefly, like I say, a dozen slides or so of the installations we've made so far a year ago. I only have 5 of them shown in the slides. Next slide. The current work we're doing right now also includes the flow equations, historic data, and what I developed for staff to pretty much instantly download the data with what I call one touch. It's an Excel spreadsheet. And then at the very end, what now? We'll just get on to a couple of maintenance items for you. So, next slide. First of all, what it is we actually did for you is a typical installation like this. This is at a number 6 site. There's a rain gauge. Keep hitting the side there. Get your little arrows. There you go. The data logger that actually collects the data, solar panel charges a battery, and a pressure transducer that you can't see behind the wall goes down into the water. It shows you what the water level is. So we have the 10 sites at Gateway, and then the 3 extra at Pelican Preserve we put in last year, and 4 rain gauges. So next slide, we just get on to the first one here. We're number 5. Good shot of the typical flow. We've done the engineering calculations and put them inside the data logger, which is the little computer, so that all the data that's coming out every hour has all the flow calculations with it, and shows you how much flow is discharging through the system and the rain in the system. Next slide. And here's what this installation looks like there. We have a staff gauge to calibrate the water levels, and solar panel, of course. Everything's just on site. It's solar powered. It's very low voltage, low power consumption. Next one, in case you've probably seen this one, but Lake 114 there, it's Gateway Pool, swimming pool, a couple of different names. This is, next slide, this is our installation. Oop, go back one. You went a little quick. Yeah, this is a little more complicated because of the water going over the top of the box, and then if it gets too high, it's impeded by the grading, but we've got that all engineered out. Next one, Stony Brook Weir. This one, this is a good installation too. There's our box and solar panels on top of the fence and a rain gauge. This is a little orifice that the water flows through until it gets up over the top of the weir. So we're recording all of that for you. Next slide. Weir number 2. This is a good shot to get a lot of flow through that, the one off Diamante Way. Next slide. Again, same type of an installation. Next slide, number 9, area 9. This was a good shot. I was there a couple of months ago when I was in town. Got a few drone pictures for you. So this is looking south.
Looking east.
Or southeast, east-south.
Southeast.
Something like that, yeah. The flow coming at us.
It's pretty clear through there, the passage.
Yeah, it's nice, nice. We do that work on the side too, drone photography. All right, so move along here to current work that we're doing for you, the flow equations, historic data, and the one touch, just real brief, to show you these types of things. So here's the data that we've pulled out of the data logger that we've been recording for the whole year, August 24th. Last year we put this in for you, and part of this current work that was just approved is to do the flow calculations, which we've done, and back calculate everything in the entire system based on the provisional data that we got from the system, along with all of the rainfall data, of course. But this has got several different types of engineering calculations. The orifice is one type of flow equation. If the water is above the whole orifice, if it's just down on the slot, that's Weir flow equation. It's all kind of nerdy stuff you probably don't know or care too much about, but we got that incorporated for you. Next one is this, the One Touch system. Now this I developed for all of the sites, all 13 sites, for your staff. And that little lightning bolt there, all staff has to do is click on that, and it'll download all of the data into the spreadsheet, 13 different tabs, and summarize all of the rainfall for the day, and if the data is current, and the battery voltage, if that's okay, and all the information's in one spot on this, so they can see at a glance how old the data is and what's missing, what's good, what's bad, so they can determine if they have to go out to the site for any reason.
John?
Yes, sir.
One point. All of this is on NAVD,
Yes, it's all in AVD.
and everything we have on our permits, you got to remember, is in GVD.
Right.
So you got a 1.15 factor on everything.
Yeah.
So if you look at this, don't get confused by the numbers, because
Yeah, those
you
were
look at
the-
the weirs, it's not what our data of looking at is typical.
That's the information that was on the EF Gaines
Yeah.
surveys that you gave me.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, yeah.
I have no idea what you just said, so I'm just gonna nod my head and say,
Two
all right.
datums that they use.
Yeah, real quick, back in 1929, the surveyors, the top surveyors of the universe surveyed everything in the world with the old-fashioned grandpa look through the brass instrument type of thing that you see in historic movies, and they surveyed everything, and they got elevations on that. It's called National Geodetic Vertical Datum of 1929. Well, as electronics and lasers and TopCon and all these other survey equipment has developed over the decades, in 1988, they said, we'd better do this again because we got a lot more accurate instruments. So they did the whole thing all over again with the laser sighting and all the super equipment of the day. Well, lo and behold, it's been found that that was all a little bit different, depending on what part of the country you're in, from the old National Geodetic Vertical Datum of 29. It's now called the North American Vertical Datum of 1988. So now they say, now we got two different numbers, and that's a 1.15 feet, 1.2, depending where you're at, difference. And GVD, the 1929, is always higher.
Higher.
Now, the new 1988 work is a foot and a quarter or so lower. So if you're looking at anything, any elevation in America at least, you have to know, you're looking at it version A or version B, for instance, the 1929 version or the 1988 version. So that gives a lot of confusion for a lot of people, but this is all from what your surveyors gave me, that information's NAVD 88.
Yeah.
So that's not in a nutshell, but the difference of that. All right, so what now? Of course, maintenance is always a huge factor here. Is Colonial Entrance, site number 10 in 2018. This is August 23rd when we first put it in. The vegetation control is the issue here in this particular picture. Take the next one.
2 years
A year
ago,
later.
2 years ago, we didn't even know it was there.
No. I almost couldn't find it this year, back in August. So, yeah, one more picture. So this is, of course, pretty important. The rain gauge is almost covered, but the solar panel is certainly covered. And this is the type of thing that needs some maintenance.
Got to be fixed.
Next one. The rain gauges. These should not have clogs in them like that because the rain is supposed to filter through, and there's a little bucket on the inside, and it tips back and forth, and every time it tips, it's 0.01 inches of rain, so that's how it tells you how much rain you have, but nothing gets through in a clog like this, unfortunately. So, next one. You started growing some vegetation in there. So, so that's it for now. Just any questions? Feel free to speak up about that.
Only question I have is with Tyler, Tyler, on you guys doing the hydraulic study, does it look like we got enough rain events to do our projections? Because we're back at control right now. The water stopped going over the weirs, at least up in the north or the upper end.
So for the record, I'm Tyler Wainwright with Tetra Tech. Yes and no. I mean, we got tons of data, which was very nice. I mean, it was great to have data to calibrate it too. The problem, which isn't a problem, is that we really didn't get any huge rainstorms this year.
We didn't get any big ones.
So, from a life perspective, that's good. But from a calibrating a hydraulic model, that's not good. So it would have been nice from that standpoint if we had a big rain event to calibrate it to. But, I mean, we can always address it next rainy season.
And Chris, how long do these monitors stay in place? Or do we have we don't have a projected end date, or do we?
No, it's,
We just keep monitoring, and therefore more data, the better? Yeah.
Right. The important thing, though, I need to point out is, you heard me say, you probably heard it, you may not have picked up on it, I said the word provisional. The data is there are numbers, but it may not be legally defendable because the maintenance has not been to the standard that needs to be so that you can guarantee what it is. The pressure transducers are good, but they drift a little bit. Anything mechanical will have a little effect over time, and those need to be calibrated on certain occasions. So that way, when you read the data, you know that it's exactly saying 21.82 NAVD.
Whose responsibility is that?
Ours.
That's on our side?
Yep, it depends how good the data is you want. If you want a ballpark data, that's okay. This is good enough stuff.
Thanks.
But if you have to defend it, or if you want to go to the Water Management District and say, hey, you gotta act on this data, the first thing they're going to say is, where's your QA, QC form? Where's your quality assurance that this is good data?
Make sure you throw away those two pictures.
Yeah, exactly. So,
What pictures?
yeah, it's as good as you want to have it. So,
It's critical because we're trying to make major inroads into South Florida to allow us in both Pelican Reserve and in Gateway to put controls on these structures.
right.
And the last thing we want them to do is to come back and throw out data for
Exactly.
12 months that we couldn't show them QAQC.
Right. So, yeah, that,
And we've taken this steps to ensure that maintenance and clean those solar panels and clean the gauges. Calibrating the probes is a different issue.
yeah, that's what the staff gauges are for, because we've surveyed in those staff gauges, and they should be resurveyed every year, for instance, so that when you read the water level against that, it says 21.28, and you go to the computer and it says 21.35, well, now you recalibrate your system back to the 21.28, because that's exactly what it's supposed to be. So there's your first data point. Now you come back in a couple of months, and that 21.28 it's off by another 3 inches. You fix it again, and then the industry standards is that you adjust that data back all the way those 2 or 3 months to where it was right the first time. So that's the type of stuff that's,
What's causing that? Because our weirs are fixed, and those staff gauges, they aren't moving. Is it the sensor?
sometimes the sensors have a little bit of of variability in them, right? Depends on the maintenance also, because they have a desiccant tube that has to keep them dry on the inside behind the membrane that senses the pressure. So things like that, it all ties in together. If the maintenance isn't done on that, then it gets moisture in there, it gets inaccurate or less accurate, you know.
Whenever we're at control, we've got a monitoring point for sure.
Yep,
Because we
yep.
know what those elevations are.
Right,
And
right.
that data, if it's at control, it better be showing 0. There's no
Right.
water going over
Right.
it, just ready to go over it.
Exactly. So,
So, okay.
So as far as the calibration of the probes, is that something we need to have a contract that's done from time to time, or?
well, you're capable of doing it yourself if you want to get out there, and I've showed Elle and some of your staff how to do that. So, you know, we can show you again, we can help with that. You can resurvey the staff gauges again once a year, make sure that that's all accurate, because, you know, some things do change over time. Kids might be playing on it, and whatever. So,
That's what I wanted to know, is that something that staff is capable of doing?
yeah, they are, if you want to commit to that, or we could do it for you. If you know, have an annual maintenance contract, you know, and come in and do it also. Either way, so you decide which way you want to go.
Any questions? Mrs. Flaherty?
Well, yes. Are we going to do the calculations, or do we have to go out? What are we going to do in-house?
We're going to do it in-house, and that's part of the tasks under the stormwater specialist position. However, our staff is out, will be cleaning those up and making sure the vegetation's away from that structure. When we first went out there, as Mr. Tinkle said, you couldn't find where the structure was. That whole area was that overgrown.
That's because it was in Colonial Country Club.
It's actually,
It's on the road to Colonial.
So real quick, so Chris, let me, just to make sure I heard you right. So the next step after we've collected the data is to analyze it, calculate it. That's what you're saying we're gonna do in-house?
no, the maintenance on the
No,
system.
the maintenance we'll do in-house,
And-
but,
All the calculations are done, it's all in the
Right.
devices. Whenever water is flowing, it tells you how much water's
yeah,
flowing.
I just want to figure out where the next step comes from.
It's really a management item also, because the data we put together to assist Tetra Tech with their work they needed, and what you can't measure, you can't manage. And there's also things that we're looking at, because you can look at rainfall events up in the system and see how high the water is in other parts. And if you have the same rainfall and it's different, obviously you have a problem with a weir or a structure or pipe somewhere in between. So it can notify you by looking at that data that you have problems somewhere in the system.
That's the problem with our system. It's so big that you can get a thunderburst in one area, like over at Stony Brook, and down in our end, there's nothing.
Yeah.
And that really sends those weirs running crazy.
That's right.
You don't know what's going on. But at least with the rain gauge, now you know why you've got some silly readings.
Of course, it's always
We've never
possible
had
if you
that.
want more rain gauges put in. You only have 4 on these 13. You don't need them within a block of each other, but if you want to add more, you know, that's always doable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see if we could clean
John.
floor first.
Seen
Appreciate it.
it more than once where it's raining in the backyard, not in the front.
Management and maintenance report.
Thanks, John.
This is just a background of some of the work that we've done out on the soccer field, and including 3 reports that we've done, and then provided that work to Mainscape, and then taken it a step further where they're implementing some of those recommendations, and the field maintenance has improved quite a bit, and we appreciate all that help from Mainscape to make that happen, including the irrigation schedules, more efficient irrigation. And we're taking that a step further right now. We're looking at actually mapping the irrigation system from an old as-built, so we have it on a CAD map, and putting the drainage structures on there too. We recently painted the manual shutoffs in the system. We had some malfunction last week where there was a broken valve and the system came on when the leagues were out there playing. So when we're doing a manual where they can come out there and shut it off if they need to, and we're leaving a key in the concession stand, and we're also going to install about a $1,200 valve that we have on a timer to the system. So if there are leagues playing, there will be no water moving through that system. So if the irrigation system malfunctions, we won't have that issue come up. And another thing we've talked to today about the consultant, he also did a report on Gateway Boulevard and Griffin on rehabbing the irrigation system, which is antiquated. And last week I got $1,000 worth of bills from Mainscape to replace batteries and change valves and issues with those controllers. It's just maintenance work. The system out there is aged, and it's like an old car. We're putting a lot of parts in it, and we're not getting any value. That report said 1.75 to 2.5 million to
You can
rebuild.
buy a lot of batteries for that.
Yeah, well, that's one thing to look at, but as a system,
Waste of the water.
well, the efficiency is a big thing, and we talked to Russ Geiger today, and he's going to give us a proposal to design the medians from Daniels back up to the new roundabout at Commerce Lakes, and it's just a prototype that we'll bring in for the board to look at, but just to assign some actual cost and design. And really, it's going to come down to what kind of landscaping you want in those medians. Do you want to continue with the oak trees? Some of them are aging, some of them, the roots are coming outside the medians, and they're starting to bring the pavement up. Well, when you go to repair the pavement and have to trim the roots, that's probably going to be the end of that oak tree.
Well, and Chris, if we do anything, now we've got to contend with Lee County, right? So,
Oh, yes.
so it's not like we have
And we
carte
better-
blanche to
and
put
we-
up what we want.
And we better do it before they tell us, because there'll be a price tag when they tell us.
Well, there is, and one thing with the rate case that went through last year is we put a 15% off the top for water, wastewater, and irrigation from that bill. So we're starting to amass some money. And over the next 6 months, we'll have enough money in the bank where we can actually start working on that R&R on that irrigation system.
Was that 1.75 to 2.5 a out of the backside estimate, or was it based on a quantity takeoff?
It was based on a quantity. Russ Geiger, who does that, is an engineer.
So they got zones and everything
He
to
went-
how it should be done.
And what was the scope of the,
Griffin and Gateway
Griffin and
Boulevard.
Gateway.
So it's big.
okay, so all, everything.
From one end to the other?
Yes, sir.
It's a
Yeah,
lot.
the entire main line system through the area.
And Chris, when you guys were looking at that, I mean, I just got an email, I think this morning, with complaints about the irrigation splashing the road and the sidewalks. So when you go through, have you thought about how can we irrigate the grass areas without saturating?
That gets to the
Sidewalks and
plant
streets.
selection and the type of system you want to have. And, those heads out there basically cover everything. And, they're
But
old.
you are considering that,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Just
that-
multiple options. Okay, great.
And that would be the prototype, because then you're really looking at a landscape committee or someone, okay, what do we want to plant in these medians and how, and get into the final design. But we want to get the process started.
Yeah.
And even if we're having enough money to do 5 medians a year and work the way up with the new control system, then that's what we'll do. But the Band-Aid time is over.
Can you implement an R&R strategy with with an antiquated system like we have. I mean, it almost sounds like it would be difficult for you to.
Our controllers
Start
are
at the
shot.
core.
Yeah,
That's our problem. Our controllers are just shot.
Yeah, and the wiring's very similar to the issues we have with the streetlights and conduit and that irrigation conduit. That system wiring just keeps getting ruptured, so they've gone to localized battery controllers. And
Horrible way to go.
basically, when they go out and replace that battery, one of those little controllers, it's $175 a pop when they do it with the service call.
And I want to just make sure we call out, because I think it's important, the fact that the concessions that we've made will help self-fund this, as opposed to if it's a $2 million project, it's not something that we necessarily would have to assess because we've made alternatives.
When he did this, he did do all three areas, east side of the road, west side of the road, and the median,
Yes, sir.
all three.
And it did a very good job. And again, with that rate case, we'll have a sustainable cash flow coming in to fund that work. And it's water efficiency also, because we are wasting a lot of water.
Wasting a hell.
And another thing I was going to bring up when we talked about the soccer fields in the report was use on the fields, because some of them are getting 700, 800, 900 hours. After 400 hours, it's very difficult to maintain. Some of it's non-resident play where we aren't supervising it. And it was just thrown out, we have key cards for the dog park, we have key cards to the pool. Do we move to key cards for the soccer field? And I'm not saying at the leagues when they come in, but off-league times when those fields, aren't being used. And it's not a recommendation, it's just something to think about, access. Because you can go out there sometime on a Sunday and there'll be 30 or 40 people from a church league somewhere that, we came over here. And I very nicely tell them you have to pay to use the field just like the other soccer leagues, but it can be a real conflict talking to them. I mean, most of them are nice to understand, and we don't throw them off the field. We say, hey, finish today, but next time you'll have to come sign up and pay just like the other leagues do.
Gotta watch those church people.
One last comment. And I will say, again, because I've spent a lot of time out there, the fields are probably in the best condition they've been in years. And both the directors, the flag has multiple directors, but I've spoke to both leagues, and they both commented on how great the fields look right now. And I think I contributed that to, Chris, your work and kind of consulting with Mainscape and getting them to pay attention to specific things and that type of stuff. And I think if you maintain, then you don't have to repair quite as much, and it's not as significant as of a repair cost as it is just to simply maintain. So, I mean, it looks good, thanks.
And there's little things we're doing too, and it sounds simple, but we just ordered some sets of wheels, to put under the goals to be able to move them so they aren't dragging them, across the field. Right. And that's all I had. I was going to mention too that we'll probably start closing the pool. It's typically 7 in the winter, but closing it at dark or about 5:30, just because our permit doesn't allow us to keep it open after dark. And we'll put a sign up there. I know in years past they've had it open later in the evening, but legally we just can't do it unless we want to install about $40,000 worth of lights to achieve 15 candle power on the pool surface. And at the next board meeting, I'll be bringing a proposal to do about $20,000 worth of work up at the pool, which we have funds in the budget, but we're going to automate all the chemical feeding systems up there and change some relays and kind of automate all that, including buying a commercial pool cleaner that at the end of the cycle, it climbs out of the pool and shuts itself off. But the staff out there, normal pool brush doesn't reach the middle of the pool. They have to get in the water. It's time consuming, and they're also cleaning the pool while people are using the pool or in those times. So we'll bring you a full proposal of all the upgrades that we're planning there.
Mrs. Flaherty?
Yes, go ahead. And you're going to extend it back for later for the summer?
Oh, yeah, when the light hours change, sure.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, so. And I have one more question.
Sure.
Since you mentioned the pool.
Go ahead.
The old picnic tables are still there that have to be removed. They're the ones for the rotten things. I'm worried that some child might run over towards them and get hurt.
We'll take care of them.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else? District engineer.
Hello.
Hello.
So, I'm Tyler Wainwright. I'm with Tetra Tech. Two items on our agenda today. First one is the status of the task authorizations. A couple ones, I guess, to point out and discuss on there. The one that Supervisor Tinkle asked about earlier, the surface water model. So, rainy season is more or less done, I guess. So we've taken all of the data that we've had over this rainy season and completed calibrating that model. So I'm not sure if it's going to be the next one or if it's going to be the first one in November, but we're planning on providing you a presentation and a report kind of summarizing our findings and what the next step is with that project and with subsequent permits that the district may want to move forward with after that. So it'll either be the next one or the first one in November. Building site plan, that one's pretty much done. Or that one is done, not pretty much. That one is all the way done. Gateway High School plan review is just ongoing with construction. Lake Bank permitting, everybody's favorite task authorization. The latest and greatest on that one is now we have to do what's called an administrative deviation.
Administrative what?
Deviation?
Deviation.
Yes, sir. Which is another permit that we get to apply for. And that's because we have slopes that are 3.8 and 3.9 to 1 instead of 4 to 1. So Lee County staff has asked us to put that together, so we're in the process of preparing that now.
You mean ones that have been built?
Yes, sir.
As built, show it's at 3.8?
That's correct.
And what was the basis of them? Did they bring a surveyor out and spot check them?
No, we provided them with the as-built because they requested them, so the as-built showed that they were that.
Okay, this is just to show them, because when we negotiated all this with them, the magic number, as I recall, was 3.6.
Yep, that's
That pond
correct.
didn't have to be changed if it was 3.6 or greater.
Yes, I agree with that.
So it's just giving them information that they'll probably use to try to come back and hang us with later.
Doesn't sound like it, though. If it's an administrative deviation, it's an authorization that you were
Do
asking
we
them
have
to
to
provide.
fix it, I guess is where I'm leading.
No, there's not any, well, they haven't asked me to fix anything. They've asked me to apply for administrative deviation.
When we met with them, they seemed to indicate that this was not going to be a problem.
I agree with that also. However,
Here, based
The
on the
key word
existing
there was
slope.
phrase seems to be.
Well, they, basically, they said that. Don't worry about it. Just, I mean,
without getting into too much detail, they've moved the goalpost on us 3 or 4 times on this, and this is the latest version of that.
What's the extent of how many lineal feet are we talking about?
It's like 6 spots over like 20,000 feet.
Were these on Phase 1 ponds?
Yes.
Okay.
that was the indication that I walked away with, was there were so few of them, don't worry about it.
I agree with that.
They were denoted on the maps, they were aware of it, they weren't worried about it.
I agree with everything you just said.
Thank you.
Knock on wood, I don't believe him.
Maybe we ought to just forget the whole thing.
Oh, there's a good idea.
I guess, yeah, my concern is, again, my recollection was also that we went ahead in good faith reliance upon the representations and insurances that this would be sufficient. And an administrative deviation means they want us to have a more formal process, it sounds like, as a matter of record. And then the question becomes, what about in the future other lakes or ponds?
It seemed to me that basically what they really wanted was the maintenance. They were concerned about the maintenance of the ponds, and they wanted that documentation. And now they're asking for something completely different than they asked for that day.
That is all correct, yes.
What maintenance?
Well, they asked originally for a lake maintenance plan, and we provided them with the pond standards document that Gateway adopted several years ago. Then they said that I had to record that document along with the HOA documents. And I said, I don't have an HOA, I'm a CDD. And then I had to argue with the county attorney's office over that for a little while. So then we moved past that. And then now we got to go get an administrative deviation for this other thing. So that's the latest hurdle that we're
What my
progressing
deal
over.
is on this maintenance. Is this bank maintenance or is this pond maintenance or
No,
both?
So regards to that, it's for the permitting, the way that the land development code is written is not conducive to CDDs. It's meant for HOAs, is how it's written, plain and simply. So what the county wants to ensure is that after the HOAs go and fix these lakes, that someone will maintain them in the future. And it's a good thing to have, but it's just the way it's written isn't relevant, in my opinion, to CDDs. So anyway, they asked us for this document that would bind Gateway to go maintain these lakes. So that's what we provided to them, was the pond maintenance standards.
Yeah, I don't know that you answered my question exactly.
Sorry, I don't-
Are we talking about slopes, or are we talking about the ponds, or both?
Both.
Both.
Well,
So this
yes,
is gonna
both.
get into littorals and all the other stuff.
Oh yeah, you have told them that you're going to maintain the littorals and the slopes and all that.
My worst fears. Knew this was coming. Okay.
So anyway, when do you
only gonna get
anticipate
worse.
that you'll have the deviation request prepared?
Maddie from our office is done with it. We've got to get, either we're going to pay the fee or Gateway's going to pay the fee, one way or the other. We got to get that. I got to get Chris to sign another affidavit of authorization for it, and then it'll be submitted next week.
Fee,
Okay.
Oh yeah, there's a fee.
how much?
I think it's $1,000. I got to look it up.
Yeah, you guys can cover that.
And this is South Florida and the county, or just the county?
No, sir, it's just the county. South Florida, interestingly enough, has it written into their rules that they give you basically a grace period of 3.5 to 1 or better.
Yeah, okay.
Is Pelican included in this?
No, sir, you're in the city of Fort Myers.
Well, we got a couple ponds in it. Or is that just Gateway?
Anybody have any
I think only
questions
Ponca
for
City.
Tyler on the task authorizations? See any?
Bidding, Phase 2 ponds, what are we looking at, in November?
Good question. I should bring that up also. So here's the plan strategy. The next public hearing is going to be November 13th or 14th with SRF. Our plan is to get approval of our construction documents at that meeting. After that, we would have approval from the state to bid them out. So assuming that we get that approval from the state, we would be ready to bid them December-ish.
Okay, we've got 1.5, 1.6 million, as I recall, that's available to do these first 3, 4, 5, whatever we come up with.
Well, as far as the state is concerned, the state will take our opinion of cost, and they will approve a loan for that amount. So that's the state side of things. The Gateway side of things, I don't recall what you have approved up to this point, but as far as the state goes, they will provide you with a loan that is based on our estimate, and then it'll get trued up after you receive the bids.
Okay, well, I guess my question is that, as I recall, we didn't spend the entire 8 million. We had about 1.5, 1.6 ballpark left over. So we could do a certain number of those ponds, depending upon the ability of the contractors to bid them off, that if they all came in under 1.6 million, we would not need a subsequent loan.
Are you talking about, no, different loan. That loan is over and done with. You're on a new loan now. New loan, new facilities plan.
What you're talking about is you're trying to fast track a portion of those out to bid, right?
Yeah.
Because we've got available funds.
Yeah,
So
and-
not
and-
waiting till the November SRF.
Yeah, well, what I'm hearing now is the original 8 million is gone.
Yes.
They basically took back the 1.5, and we're gonna have to request it back through a separate loan.
Yes. So that loan that was up to 8 million was for a specific set of lakes. You have done all those lakes. Those lakes are done. So now the next facilities plan that we got approval for in whatever May, that's for the next set of lakes. That'll be a new loan.
We didn't get to keep the change on that one.
Usually, most states, they just transfer it over, but I guess we do it the hard way here. Welcome to Florida. Okay.
I guess your next thing is the roundabout at Gateway Boulevard and Commerce Lakes Drive.
Just for last.
Yes, ma'am. So I passed out to all of you all. Hopefully you all have a copy. We were tasked to put together an opinion of probable construction cost for the proposed improvements at just the Commerce Lakes roundabout. So we did two options. So there's two sheets here. First sheet is basically what the Lee County administrative minimum standards would be for those improvements. And that would be to encase your existing utilities that will end up underneath that roundabout. I did add in there the replacement of the existing valves on those mains, just because a lot of them are inoperable now, and it would just seem to make a lot of sense to replace those while you already have them dug up and while you're encasing everything else.
Can we get this on the screen, this, so you can see it on the
Oh,
screen?
you mean this thing?
I actually don't have the graphic of that. We just have the handout.
Okay, because I had some questions on this.
So that's page one. Page two is, this is just an option. This is not required. This is for you to consider. That's basically replacing all of those mains under the roundabout. Now, the reason why we put this together is because you have mains that are 30-ish years old that are going to be ending up under this nice new roundabout. And while you're digging it up, if you do have the funds and wish to proceed with that, it's a good time to replace them as any. So that's what we think it will cost if you choose to replace them. Now, the specifics in here about what type of material you use, if you go with HDPE or PVC, can all be worked out. But as a magnitude of cost, it'll be pretty similar what you choose as far as the details. But that's basically the cost that you can expect to incur as far as the utility improvements. Now, there's some specifics that are still being worked out between Gateway and the county regarding the limits of what needs to be dealt with. So I would say that this cost is on the high side of things right now. And I think it's likely that sections of this, if you should so choose, can be eliminated from this. Like sections of this force main are already existing under the road that aren't encased, and that road really isn't going to get widened too much, only about 10 feet in those areas. So we've had discussions with the county about, listen, what do you want me to do with this? Do you really want me to encase this? It's already underneath the existing road. So there's opportunities for things like that. But the downside to doing things like that is if those old mains do have breaks in them, obviously it's on your dime to fix them. So there's a lot of details to be working out here. But as far as magnitude of cost is concerned, that's what you're looking at.
What about lights and signs? Did you look into that at all?
Lights, the engineer for Cardno is putting together. He's got to redesign his layout and space them with the new, I don't know what the right word is, luminaire, is that the right word? He's got to redesign his lighting plan, and then we're going to do a cost analysis on that, but I don't know how many lights they're putting up right now. As far as the sign goes, I don't have one put together, but basically it's about $1,500 a post. We can count up the posts quickly and get you a number on that.
Cardinal indicated that the current spacing and the type of lights we have going with, as I recall, going to the LED would be too bright at those intersections. So I gathered that he was going to have less spacing than we currently have at the intersection itself. So we may not have quite as many additional poles, but we do have to buy the poles, and we do have to get the LEDs on those. And I thought Bentley was working with them. Bentley knows what's out there, that they should be providing them with the information on the upgraded cost. And I have no idea how many street signs. They're going to have to tell us that.
You know, I have a question about whether we really do have uniformity of street lighting in the community, because I know that there are areas that they're all the same, and then you continue on and they're different. And then you get down to the 2-lane and they're different again. And then you get down to where the palm trees are and they're different again.
Yeah.
So do we really, is it really gonna matter? Why don't, I'm asking the question, would it be better, or in our better interest, to just let the county put in their signs and maintain, or their lighting and maintain it?
Well, if you do, I think you're going to have people upset, because the ones we have right now are very camouflaged. And if you go down Martin Luther King downtown, look at the street lights, that's what you're going to get. That standard steel post with that steel hangout and that bulb that looks like it was probably done in New York City back in the 1800s. They look horrible. They look horrible. It's going to change the look if you do that. But I'd rather see what the price is than to make the decision of the need and necessity. I'm more worried about the way these roundabouts are, how many of those green $1,500 MUTCD compliant with, what do you call it, the reflective, all the bells and whistles, how much are those gonna cost?
And
Because you don't go up to one of those roundabouts and have one sign.
No.
There's gonna be a lot of signs out there, and it's gonna be expensive.
And and it's the same thing with the lighting. I'm just throwing the idea out there because.
Let's see what the money is.
It could be really expensive.
But one question I had was on this map, and is it on the screen there where people can see it?
No, sir. I don't have that graphic up.
I can tell you just real quickly, there's plus or minus 50 signs on the roundabout. They're
what I
about $1,500 a piece. So if
it's
you're looking at
100
$75 grand.
100
a sign.
grand on the roundabout just for signs only.
And
Mr. Guy, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My recollection is that we spent over $1 million to get Gateway Boulevard and Griffin Drive into shape so that Lee County would take them over.
Yes, sir.
Is that your recollection?
That's correct.
Why can't we expect Lee County to pay for all of this stuff on a roundabout that is their idea and what they want to do, and have never asked us one question about whether we wanted a preferred a traffic light or a roundabout? This is their whole thing. Let them pay for it.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that's outside of something for me to do, I guess. We're just asked to tell you how much these utility relocates would cost. As far as, if you guys want to negotiate with the county for improvements, I'd support you.
It's just like Washington. They know what you want and need.
I'm not joking. I'm serious. I think they're taking us for a ride, and I resent it.
So I will say that Gateway entered into an agreement with the county for the conveyance of that road. And Tony may have better information than I do, but as far as I know, the agreement says that if utility relocates or improvements are necessary due to roadway reconfigurations or whatever, it's on Gateway's dime.
Really?
Well, I guess the question though is.
What lawyer signed that off on that?
I guess what that begs the question though is, we've talked about this briefly, sort of tangentially, was that the Commerce Lakes Drive portion is the district-owned right-of-way. They want to engage in activity on a district-owned right-of-way. They don't have enough geometry, as I understand it, to do the roundabout without the district either deeding them the roadway segment, giving an easement to the county for the roadway segment, or entering into a project agreement. And typically, when you don't have a willing seller of a parcel for governmental infrastructure, typically the governmental body will engage in discussions for eminent domain or a taking, and usually there's compensation that goes with that. And CDDs are entitled to compensation. I've had many CDDs that have received nice amounts of money to relocate signs and compensate for the taking of land or improvements. So I guess that might be part of what Mr. Yao was saying. That's part of the bargaining chip is, okay, just for discussion's sake of, or assuming arguendo, the district is inclined to say, we're okay with this plan. We will encase the utilities, but we would like you to, here's the compensation we're asking for this piece that you want. We will give you this roadway segment of Commerce Lakes Drive that we own, that WCI brought up to snuff. WCI paid for that segment to get up to speed and meet standards. So that's why that's a good roadway segment now. It needs no rehabilitation. And that might be part of the bargaining chip with the county, to reduce the amount of money the district lays out or have the county contribute part of it. So the board can do that. They can say, you know what, great plan, but I don't know how you're gonna implement it without using our right-of-way.
So
I'm curious,
That might be,
We're gonna have to go.
That's not being a bad neighbor, that's being realistic.
one of the questions that I didn't ask when the gentleman was here last week, and I just thinking about it, like, I can't believe that we all didn't jump in on it, but we focused on the efficiency of the roundabout versus other solutions and how they got to that point. What we didn't ask is, what was the cost difference between light and roundabout, and would we be willing to sacrifice 20% of efficiency for, 40% less cost? And I'm pleading ignorance. I don't know if it's apples to apples or not. And we're probably too late to even, we're past that,
The
but.
Board of County Commissioners already voted.
But I'm just curious, I
And
didn't
all
even
that-
think about the
And all that
cost.
came out in that meeting. The issue is the guy that you were talking about that was at the meeting, we did ask about what Bill was talking about, and that did not go over. So if we're gonna do it, we're gonna have to take it to a level higher.
Yeah, because I think he was taking the position that, if we're building the roundabout with the county, and if you agreed to, then you got to still relocate your lines. And he was not in a position to, he said it's not in the project budget to pay any compensation for land. Not to be argumentative or obnoxious, but I've heard that discussion many times from governmental bodies. It's, at the outset, it's not in our budget, but they somehow, at times, can find ways to adjust their budgets.
Because they never go over
Sometimes you
budget.
gotta be obnoxious.
Including high schools over in Estero.
Keep
I
in mind,
think that's called a change order.
keep in mind another thing too, is if the roads had stayed ours and we were changing it, we'd be doing the same thing.
If the
Yeah, we would've had $1
We'd
million
be doing
in
it the
our
same,
pocket to
we'd
do
be
it.
doing the same thing.
We'd have a street light.
Well, I can tell you that
We'd have a stoplight.
the county DOT is aware of how much money Gateway is going to have to spend or may have to spend. And it's been discussed that Gateway may look for compensation for acquisition of the right-of-way. The response that I have received from both the deputy director and the director of DOT was that if that is the case, then they will seek a permit from Gateway to construct that on that section of the right-of-way instead of acquiring the right-of-way.
Say that again?
They have replied that they will seek a permit to construct that road improvement on your right-of-way.
But they would request that authorization from Gateway.
They would request that authorization from Gateway. I can't tell you what that process entails because that's never happened before.
It's a license agreement, and otherwise they're trespassing. And that's a taking where they would owe us compensation. So we'd have to give them authorization. It gets back to the same issue as for us, if the district wants to give them the approval to construct it.
So there's all of that to consider. And yes, I mean, Gateway has the option of just doing absolutely nothing, and the county would probably, I guess, end up in eminent domain, I suppose, if they had to. There's also to consider that Gateway does a whole lot of work on that right-of-way all over Gateway, and picking a fight with DOT may not be in the best long-term interest also.
I agree. Question I had is that there is a sanitary sewer in Gateway Boulevard, the northbound lane that goes all the way up to and past the Gateway Boulevard Deli and comes south down. In fact, you hit the manhole covers if you drive on the road. That's not on this drawing.
No, so the manhole adjustments, there's, you said the deli? Are you looking at the Griffin one? You're looking down here?
No, I'm looking at, if you start at the Gateway Boulevard Deli,
Yep.
there's a sanitary sewer that heads south.
Oh, yeah,
down the
down
middle of the
Gateway Boulevard,
northbound
and the
lane,
northbound lane, yes.
But it's not on this drawing.
No, and I'm not including the manhole adjustments in Gateway's costs.
So we don't have to encase that sanitary sewer?
No, we're not touching sanitary sewer,
Oh, well, and that's, well, the,
just pressure.
the problem is that you've got a green line coming from the west on Commerce Lakes Drive.
Yep.
That creates a third line that goes into the pump station. That's a sanitary sewer.
That's a 4-inch force main that comes from the west. There's 3 force mains in that area.
Three just right there.
There's a 6 and a 12
Okay, so-
parallel that go up and down Gateway Boulevard, and there's a 4 that comes from
I
the
know
west.
the
that
6
goes
and
into
12
B1.
going north, but there's a 4 coming from
Commerce Lakes,
the pump station at West Links?
pump station on Commerce Lakes Drive, right in front of Daniels Preserve. Pumps down, goes across Gateway Boulevard right there.
There's another one that
Well,
goes the
I'm talking
other
about
way, the
west.
end of Commerce Lake. isn't it?
West.
Another force main that goes down the other way?
Yeah, I don't think there is.
I may just have it
Because it
flipped on that
dumps
drawing, but
all of-
there's a third force main in there. On that drawing, it might just be flipped the wrong way.
On the west side?
It's on the
West side,
east,
there's
east
only
side.
East side, I agree with that, yeah, okay. Well, but anyway, the bottom line is that the sanitary sewers that are in this area that feed that pump station, those aren't showing, and those don't have to be done other than manhole adjustments.
Right, they've got to adjust the manholes, and then
That
one of the
saves a lot
comments
of money.
that we gave them on their 60% was to relocate some of those crosswalks because they're ending up in the mats. But no, we're not proposing any adjustments to sanitary.
Well, we're sitting here with a utility system that's, let's see, 86, 14, 30, 33, 32, 33 years old. Going with that option of the 277, which is basically encasing a 33-year-old pipe under a road. Just light the fuse on dynamite. That's crazy.
Mrs.
It's
Flaherty,
nothing but trouble.
questions for,
I have just one question.
Yes, ma'am.
There isn't any reason why we couldn't try negotiating with Lee County about this. It doesn't have to be a negativity, we don't have to make enemies, but negotiation can be very beneficial for both, so that you keep the agreement and make everyone happy. Correct?
I would invite you to negotiate with them however you see fit. Yes, ma'am.
I mean, you could do it with a positive, friendly attitude. You don't have to say, we want this. You can approach it more diplomatically.
I'm with you.
Sometimes you gotta be obnoxious, you can't always be diplomatic.
Well, we could try the diplomatic
but
approach.
what we have to know is, what do we want to ask them for?
If
What do we want?
we want them to pay.
Ask them to pay the whole darn thing.
Well, we'll
That's-
If
sell
they-
them the road
if-
for $500,000.
If they had put in a traffic signal there, we wouldn't be having any of this discussion.
That's true.
This is all their decision. Let them pay for it.
Hey, Tyler, from an engineering perspective, utilities that are there right now, the water and sewer lines, will they interfere with or conflict with the proposed county roundabout improvements?
Are you reading from the agreement?
Yes.
Will they interfere with?
Or conflict with or interfere with?
That's the question I raised about 4 months ago, and the issue was the exposure and their requirements that you have to put in casing.
Will they interfere with? Well, they're not going to in conflict with. I can tell you that much. Will they interfere with? That depends on how you define the word interfere, sir.
Well, as the county indicated, our utilities will interfere with their proposed improvements.
The county has indicated that the utilities in their current state do not meet the standards of which Lee County Administrative Code requires, and that their operation, I suppose, may interfere with the construction of their roadway.
That's the deal they're taking.
I understand about it, but have they used the term interfere with or conflicts with? Have they said that?
I'm sorry, I don't have the memory on top of me to say that they've ever used the word interfere. I can search my emails and confirm.
The issue where we're at is who's going to go and meet with them and do this negotiation. That's where you're at.
And what are we going to ask for?
That's the problem.
I mean, I can throw this out there, and you guys can like this idea or not like this idea. The cost of doing the lighting and the cost of doing the signs and the lighting in perpetuity with the maintenance and the electric charges for the lighting is probably going to be about the same as the utilities. So there's an option if you could choose to do one or the other.
And keep in mind, this is Commerce Lakes. It will be equally or greater than that at Griffin Drive.
Yeah, I guess the part that maybe
Much
we
worse.
haven't discussed in detail yet is on that lighting, the perpetual operation of that lighting is expensive. I mean, you're gonna pay the electric on it forever. If it's the county's lighting, you don't.
Well, I think we need, to your point, I think we need to look at,
See what it's gonna cost.
Either future negotiations, when we're looking at how much it's gonna cost for Griffin, because I think we wanna set a little bit of a precedent, hey, we'll cover this cost if you'll cover this. And hopefully, what holds true during the first negotiation would hold true in the second. It's, we'll do the lights now because the utilities are gonna be way more expensive this second.
All I'm saying is I've done this before, and I'll tell you where this is headed. It is
tell
not,
us where it's headed?
it is not going to be friendly.
So what?
I'm just saying, Bill, I've been down this road. It's not going to be friendly.
I've been down these roads too.
But
It may not be friendly, but they really are forcing roundabouts on the community that I don't think the community's really that happy about.
county has accepted what staff told them.
I know.
I was sitting at the meeting and I couldn't believe it. But that's what happened.
I'll throw you another curveball if you'd like to hear it.
Oh, by all means.
Great.
How about a sinker instead?
bridge.
You want to throw a knuckleball too?
Under the bridge.
Well, it's playoff season now, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So, a similar situation took place when the school board put in a roundabout And the county paid to encase your mains. This time they're not.
A school board, can you be a little bit more definitive?
On your school, not your school, the Gateway High School that's getting built is building a roundabout out front.
Yes.
That roundabout's going to end up over utilities. Those utilities were encased and paid for by Lee County.
Oh, what was that
Sounds
magic
like
word
a
we were
precedent
looking
to
for?
me.
Leverage?
Now, how that slipped by, I can't tell you, but it did. Maybe that was a conscious decision, maybe it wasn't, but I can tell you they're paying for it.
So they're doing,
Well, that makes sense.
so they're doing all of the prep work on utilities for the school at the county expense.
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
Lee County DOT
Okay.
is picking up the cost of the utility relocation that we're talking about here, only up there at that location. In other words, school isn't putting it in their budget.
I don't know whose budget it comes out of. I don't know if it's DOT or school board. I don't know how that works. Is that what you're asking?
They're going
like
to
they're
argue they're
connected.
paying themselves. Somebody needs to go down and talk to them, and just like that guy is sitting here the other night, is, no. No, that's what they're going to say to you. No.
That's because you didn't have the
And they-
authority to say yes.
I agree, Bill. So that means we got to go higher, but I think what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go political.
I think we need to, may I talk?
Yes, go ahead.
May- Schedule some kind of meeting to see if we can negotiate. That would be the first step.
They won't
You
negotiate
know,
this. in public.
we've got a county commissioner that lives in your neighborhood, Ed.
Mm-hmm.
Have you discussed any of this with him?
Numerous times, and he's saying, I'm going by what my staff is recommending, which is the same thing we do, so we can't argue about that. The issue is the money side of it. And Bill brings out a good point. My only thing is that my experience is that they aren't gonna negotiate in the public, I can tell you that right now. You're gonna have to have a meeting with them downtown, and it'll be inside a closed room so that nobody hears outside how loud it gets.
I don't care where they have it.
That's right,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
The big thing is who you're gonna get there besides staff, because staff is not going to budge.
I will just throw this out there one more time. Gateway's looking to do a lot of landscaping improvements in Lee County right away. Gateway's looking to replace a lot of irrigation, piping, controllers, et cetera, in Lee County right away.
Yep.
You guys have landscapers run up and down Lee County right away all day long with questionable
They can make it
MOT.
rough.
There's pros and cons to doing it both ways. I'm just saying that the county could take, you're not, I would recommend playing nice with them. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, they can play hardball.
You got to remember who you're working for.
I do, and that's why
He
I'm
is, he's
trying to
telling
give you
us what
good
we need
advice
to hear,
right
Bill.
now.
He's telling us what we need to hear.
We still could try and
It
negotiate.
doesn't hurt, go ahead, Mr.
Oh,
Schumer.
I was just going to follow up on Tyler's comment about paying for the lighting in perpetuity, because we have a list of 10 things they've asked us for, just on the lighting. We did get a cost for the fixtures, the double boxes we use down there. It's about $600 a piece. The light poles are not manufactured anymore. That company is long out of business, but Bentley has another source. We'll have a dollar figure on those poles tomorrow.
You're
But
talking about the existing concrete ones that we.
well, the brown double box that goes in the medians coming up into that area.
It's the multi-sided post that has a T on the top with the two. Now, the boxes are LED.
Right.
Okay.
And one thing about those too is those boxes, like a lot of the other facilities, the utility lines are 25 and 30 years old. Some of them are only held together by the screw going through, and they will need replacement in the next few years. So to continue with that look, you're going to be replacing that look. And again, even though you have that plain Jane County lighting in there, you aren't paying the electric bill, you aren't paying for damages, you aren't absorbing all those costs. So if you want the look, that look is going to come with quite a price tag. And you are going to be redoing the lighting in those medians in the future. And budgets may force you to go to that county look when you're replacing it.
I'd rather
so-
have landscaping dollars
Yeah.
or, plants than light fixtures.
And it really is, like I said, we got 10 questions, and Tyler looked them over, and he's like, well, off the top of my head, I know answer to one, but the rest of the stuff's it's very complicated. And again, a car goes through that median and hits one of our lights, we're gonna be going in there and fixing it and paying for the electricity and doing it, where if the county does it, we just sit back and say, there's your electric bill, there's your fixture, there's your problem. And my recommendation would be to leave the lighting alone and leave it county, and again, dress it up with some landscaping and make it look nice that way. But I will have the pricing by Monday on the poles and the light fixtures.
I'm more worried about the street signs.
There's a lot of signs out there for sure, and based on experience with what happened with the last set, those signs get run over all the time. I mean, I don't know the number of how many of you replaced, but you replaced a ton, haven't you?
Yeah, and in a cul-de-sac, you probably, roundabout, you probably be replacing more.
I will tell you for sure. So I drive through a roundabout to work every single day, and those signs get run over all the time in the roundabout, just from people not paying attention going around the curve and running into them, and they get run over a lot. So, I mean, I like those signs out there that you have, and Gateway's used to them, and that's great, but just realize that there's a large cost associated with not only putting them up the first time, but continuing to put them back up.
Okay.
So what do you need right now?
I guess I don't need anything, so this is just informational for you guys to try to think about how you'd like to move forward. I think, if you would like to enter into some sort of negotiation with the county and figure out what the next step is, I think somebody said earlier, we just need to decide who and when.
Well, at that last meeting, I thought we moved it to this meeting, that he wanted a decision of how we were going to handle that Commerce Lakes Drive East acquisition.
Well, if you're ready to decide, I guess decide. If not,
Negotiate.
negotiate. I don't know.
Perhaps we take that into the negotiation, but, I mean, this needs to be done fairly quickly. This can't be delayed.
Can't we
Yeah.
instruct Chris to first, work to schedule a meeting?
Well, sure, we can go
Then we
in
can
and
figure
talk
out
to
who the
him.
participants are gonna be.
And I'll echo Tyler's sentiment too, with the age of those lines. I would drop the extra dollars and just replace them with new lines and new
Totally
valves if
agree.
they're
Why
gonna
not
be paid.
30%?
Don't even take a chance on that.
Increase border.
Because if we have to go in there and it's under the paving, we'll be repaving those roads and
Yeah,
closing
That's too
them.
risky.
But if they had put in a traffic light instead, you'd be doing the same thing.
Correct.
Well, that was my argument at that last meeting, Bill, is that all of these costs, had that been put into the cost-effective analysis of a roundabout versus a streetlight, and as I recall, the guy said still wouldn't have been. So they're gonna argue with us. But keep in mind, it wasn't their nickel, it's our nickel. That's the difference. And our nickel's turning into a lot of nickels. Because if we like Commerce Lakes negotiations, we'll love Griffin Drive.
Well, we might as well
Get it off.
get started.
Yep.
I think we need to at least try, because this is gonna be very expensive. So you're gonna schedule a meeting,
Yes, and
figure out who the participants are. Okay,
Well,
thank you.
that's it for me then.
Have a good rest of your evening. I'm gonna ask for a 5-minute break, because I need one.
Because I can.
Just 5 minutes.
That's what I hear at home, because I can. 500,000 divided
I know,
by 6,600. That can't be right.